Hi, friends, and welcome to Podcast Barbie. I am Kier, and I'm hitting reset on my podcast journey. In this episode, I'm going to share why I decided to restart podcasting and what inspired Podcast Barbie specifically, what kind of adventures, real talk, and stories you can expect here. So grab your headphones and let's start this journey together. All right. So a lot of you are probably wondering, what the heck here? Do you need another rabbit hole of adventures? I think that it's important to recognize that as individuals, we are going to be creative. We're going to have different chapters of our book of life. I think for me, it's more about discovering what I want to do with my life because there have been so many different chapters up until this point. And for those of you who have known me for a little bit of time, you know that it's really important for me that there's growth and change and that we're all continuing to be the best versions of ourselves. And so I think the most important thing that I try to take away from life and just the journey in general is that you can't expect. So you have to expect the unexpected. So for me, that looks like being able to recognize that sometimes things are going to come and they're not going to be what I want, but I can help change them into what I would want. And I think that's important for a lot of people in general and just the world in general is that sometimes we have this idea that if we don't do things to perfection or if we don't hold up our standard of what we think life should be, then life is not worth living. And I think that that's really a sad way to live life. And I don't think that that is how people should live their life. And so I think for me, it's more been about what can you discover that will help make life the best life you can have. And obviously, there are going to be things that come and go in life that, like I said, are unexpected. But right now in my life, I really am working on laughter and storytelling and dance and enjoying the animals and all of those things. And so, podcasting for me is a way to take those ideas and share them with other people. So, for those of you who are listening and have had podcasts where you're like, what are we doing listening to this? I encourage you to specifically find podcasts that are in your interest. So, for example, I love podcasts that talk about wellness and journeys and working on yourself, but also like recognizing that we're not perfect and there are going to be things that we have to change. And taking those and figuring out which podcasts make the most sense for what you're wanting. So if you're into like true crime, find a true crime podcast. If you're wanting one that's about like the secrets of cooking, like listen to that. This specific podcast is going to be a wide variety of things. So I am running an animal sanctuary out of my home. I have 10 animals. I have 5 ducks, a hamster, 3 cats, and my best friend, who's my dog, Aurelian. And he is just my sweet boy. And within running an in-home sanctuary, there are lots of challenges, whether it's figuring out sickness or figuring out trips and all the things that come in with that and feeding and scheduling and all that. I'm going to be taking some deep dives into what that looks like in this podcast. And then I also am really big into the journey of wellness. So what does that look like as far as mindfulness and mental wellness and emotional wellness and physical wellness? And although I am not a doctor or a nutritionist or a sports therapist, I do have a lot of experience in those categories as someone who was a dietary aide in an old folks home. And I've been a personal trainer and I am a vegan and I have a lot of interesting facts about myself that can be very helpful for anyone who may or may not be interested in those things. And so I think the most positive thing that I find from podcasting is just remembering that yes, some podcasts are going to help, and yes, some podcasts are going to give you an idea into how to become a better person. But at the end of the day, you are in charge of becoming a better person. And so I hope that you look at podcasts as a way to grow within that. So let's dive into what Podcast Barbie even is. Okay. So for those of you who are watching this versus just listening, you can see that I am decked out in pink. The desk is pink. The microphone is pink, all the pink jazz, except for my lovely green background. as my backdrop, for those of you who are not here and just listening, I have little pink items. So I have a Cheshire cat. I have a candle that is shaped like a disco ball. It's pink. It's so much fun. And then, of course, I have like pops of color within florals and like little accessories I have around the desk, but it's a little less cluttered than some other desks I have seen. And the reason behind that is because pink is such an interesting color. So a lot of people associate pink as this like feminine, interesting, only applies to girls color. But the fun part about pink is that it actually originated as a color for boys. And as life and culture and journeys have evolved through time, pink has turned into a more feminine color, which I mean, I would agree that it is a very soft and somewhat feminine color, but I just think colors shouldn't have a gender. And I have, through life, had an on and off relationship with the color pink. I love the color pink now. However, when I was younger, I did not as much. So up until the age of probably 8 or 9, pink was my favorite color. And everyone knew that was my favorite color. Then when I like started to outgrow elementary school, pink no longer was my favorite color. And this was because I have an older brother and he loved all things hunting and camping and camouflage. And I wanted to be just like my big brother. So, of course, I threw away everything pink and wanted green and camouflage and all things nature, which made sense because I love things that are involving nature and I love animals and I loved being outside and I enjoyed those things. But as I got older, I recognized that you don't enjoy hunting and you're vegan and these don't really make sense and it's just a color. And I've come into my softer feminine side of things, which I think is really important. And obviously through life, you find ways of being more colorful and more, I guess, intuitive of what you think you feel like. And so for me, the color pink has now become who I find myself wearing more often and what I enjoy being around. However, green is still my favorite color. Blue is a very, very close second. And so I guess I would say that now pink and maybe having the nickname Barbie for like the last, I don't know, 5 years, I've started to lean into it more. And having the last name Joy, obviously Joyful Adventures and my joyful journey, which will be part of the podcast, is Joyful Journey. When I started a podcast for like during COVID 4.5 years ago, it was Joyful Journey. And the restarting and rebranding, I was like, okay, so I go by DJ Barbie when I'm DJing at like dances and things. What if I do podcast Barbie? And so I went down this very deep rabbit hole of all things Barbie related. And not like, I don't want to be like a Barbie brand because I have no interest in trademarking that because, copyright laws. However, I love the idea of Barbie. So for those of you who have seen the movie with Margot Robbie, that live action version of Barbie is what I relate myself to. Barbie is not in a box anymore. Barbie is women, men, trans, non-binary. Barbie is just Barbie. And I think that everyone can relate to Barbie in a way now that we have that live action movie than we could before. Because before it was just a children's toy, which I never was interested in growing up. I wanted more realistic things. I like to be outside. I like to be with horses. However, I've always found Barbie's outfits to be amazing. And as someone who models in fashion, I love like all things color and accessories. And Barbie is the queen of accessorizing. And now that we have changed who Barbie is, she's no longer blonde hair, blue eyes. I'm blonde hair, green eyes. I think that I relate more to Barbie on a deeper level. And my goal with Podcast Barbie was not to make it all about the Barbie thing and me being a plastic blonde, but to make it more about Barbie has different modes sometimes. So I like to call myself Career Barbie, which a friend called me that a while back. And I was like, you're honestly right. I am kind of like a career Barbie. And so what that means is I have different things that I do. So we're getting ready to open a coffee shop that I'll be managing in Simpsonville, South Carolina called Crown and Bloom. That is my like entrepreneur Barbie. And then I also am a vet tech specialist. So I travel the upstate taking care of dogs and cats and doing like nail trims and overnights and check-ins and things like that. And obviously like having the animal sanctuary. That's one of my other like, I guess, quote unquote careers. And then I also really enjoy veganism and fitness and going to the gym and swimming. And so I believe that Barbie kind of takes her hat off in different avenues and puts on different hats. And so for me, Podcast Barbie was a great way of doing what I do in life and taking that on into a microphone and into a podcast because there's so many different things that I can talk about. And there's so many things that Barbie does. And so I think it just made sense for me to combine the two personalities And it's not like it's an alter ego or anything. It definitely is just like me talking as Kier, but just calling it Podcast Barbie. And the goal with this is that I'm in the Joyful Studio, which is the name of my home, and my dance studio, which is the room that my office is set up in. I think this is just the perfect opportunity to combine Podcast Barbie with that. And for those of you who are listening who are like, what does this mean, Barbie? Like, are we going to be listening about her career changes? Not per se. I definitely am happy to record an episode or two about the different careers I have had through life as a 26-year-old now. But I would like for this to definitely be more about ways to talk about like life. And I want to bring on different people to talk about their lives and the things that they do in the world. And I want to support small businesses and women owned businesses. And I want to make sure that I am showcasing all the great things about South Carolina and the world that I live in and all the things that I do. And I think that a podcast is a great way to do that. And I want to talk to you like a friend versus talking to you like a stranger, even though you are strangers to me. I want this to be more of just like a settle in. Maybe you're in a car on your way to work, or maybe you're sitting down and drinking some tea or your favorite beverage. Fun fact about me, even though I'm going to be managing a coffee shop and have managed other coffee shops, I do not drink coffee. So if you ever see me on these podcast recordings and you're like, wonder what she drinks, I'm probably drinking water, or I have my Life Sip, which is a Circle brand. And right now I have Honeycrisp Apple because I'm a 5-year-old deep down. So if you ever see me drinking and you're like, what's she drinking? It's probably water or some sort of juice or some sort of like electrolyte drink or kombucha. I love kombucha. I also love the apple cider vinegar drinks from Trader Joe's. So if you are like, wonder what she's drinking, that is what I'm drinking. And I definitely will go down a rabbit hole of finding drinks and vegan foods out in stores and traveling, because as a dancer, there are a lot of times where I'm like, I need to bring snacks, and I don't always have the ability to stop in the places that I'm visiting. So I always plan ahead and have a bag of snacks versus having to go to a grocery store or a convenience stop or a gas station. And I will definitely tell you guys all the best places to find the best snacks, vegan and not vegan, because usually you can find both. And a lot of things are just accidentally vegan, which is a huge pro to me. So we will talk about all things involving snacks, veganism, dancing, bring on some people, talk about entrepreneurship and business. Please shout out some ideas of things you might want to listen to and things that you're like, this seems like she might have an interest or knowledge of. We'll also talk about all things like involving wellness, emotional, physical, mental, all those things. And we can deep dive into all things fun and colorful. I have pretty much decorated or DIY'd every room in this house. And we can definitely talk about putting up 6-foot mirrors in this room, or we can talk about how I put on rainbow decals onto my staircase leading up to the upstairs, which I have a video of that on my Instagram. You guys should follow it, joyful.adventures. However, there are a lot of other things that people are like, how, like, buying decor is expensive. And I have some interesting ways outside of like thrift stores and Facebook Marketplace of discovering items that are like thrifted or a lot cheaper. And so I can definitely go down that rabbit hole of decor or DIY and how to take care of a rental home. And then we can also deep dive down color schemes and what matches what. Because even though I might have a lot of pinks and greens, you got to add some extra color pops of rainbows or florals or things that might add glitz and glam and catch your eye in other parts. Because if it was just every single thing was pink, holy guacamole, I think that might be a little bit excessive. Not that what I already have as pink is not excessive. That would be a little bit more excessive. But yeah, definitely appreciate all of you listening, and I hope you're having a wonderful Friday. Just so you're all aware, I will be releasing these episodes every Friday at 7 a.m. And they will be available on Spotify, YouTube, and Red Circle. And the plan is to have them released at 7 a.m. And I'll just give you a little sneak peek into the first couple episodes. So this one obviously is my relaunch. So just trying to build curiosity and get you all interested and like talk about what's to come and get your guys' ideas. And then I'll be deep diving into like coffee shop chronicles and being a pet parent and veganism and dancing through life. And then I have an episode called Grief, Growth, and Grace. And this will be about grief work and holistic healing and how to process through grief, but also how to recognize that not everything that is involving grief has to be sad. And then we'll also have an episode about adventuring in social media. So, managing brands, personal Instagrams, traveling, things like that, and social media lessons that I've learned. And then I definitely want to do a podcast episode about meeting other small businesses, so collaboration with a small business. If you are a small business and you're interested, definitely shout me out or give me a DM. And then I also have one about love, politics, and liberty. So, fun fact, I am a libertarian, but not in a crazy way. And so we'll talk a little bit about like values and like a hot take of what that looks like for me in life. And then I definitely wanna do a Q&A, and my goal is to have you guys invested in getting some answers to your questions about relationships or loss or families or pets or decor or DIY, anything that you might be interested in. I wanna get your questions and I will try to answer them as best as possible, and then we can talk about all things involving that. And then fun fact, I am engaged, and he lives out of my house. So he travels the country as a pipeline inspector, and we can talk about all things involving engagement and wedding planning and what that looks like because we have a very unconventional engagement, and doing a long distance relationship can be hard. So talking about a long distance relationship and how we actually put our relationship on pause to like figure out our own crap and to just like deep dive into what we each needed and wanted and could bring to the table as far as the relationship went. And so we can definitely deep dive into all of that and what that looks like and how to have a long distance relationship that's healthy and how to face your traumas and your fears head on and not to allow those traumas to be a setback in your relationship because I think that even though you can heal through a relationship, like while you're in a relationship, not with a partner, like I'm not saying your partner should heal you, but I'm saying while you're healing in a relationship, it's important to face those healing natures. So nurture versus nature, what are some targeted areas that you can use to grow? What are some areas you need to grow in? And being able to recognize that we all have our own things that we're going through, and it takes two to tango, and it takes two to be in a relationship. And I think it's important to recognize our own fears and traumas. And unfortunately, the fun fact about being in a relationship is while you are on the journey of a relationship, you often discover those traumas and those triggers. And I think it's important to face them head on. And I definitely want to talk about those a little bit more on this podcast journey with all of you. But I appreciate you all listening, and I hope the rest of your day is wonderful, regardless of if you're listening to this on Friday or if you are listening to this on another day. I hope that you're able to have a peaceful journey through the evening. And please feel free to join the conversation on Instagram. So it's at joiful.adventures. TikTok, podcast is of course Podcast Barbie on YouTube. Here is a Spotify. I'm also going to be on Red Circle. And then if there's other ones you're like, oh, I would love to hear it on this other thing, let me know. I did not realize that Anchor had changed to Spotify for podcasters, so that's been a new one for me. But let's stay connected. Subscribe so you never miss a moment of the Barbie energy. And I look forward to talking to all of you later on, and I will chat with you next week. Thanks so much.